So hey to everyone who's just joined. Thank you for hopping on today. We're going to get started now, and we're going to be running through this webinar, which is called Build Observability with Honeycomb. So my name is Mike. I'm a customer engineer here at Buildkite, and I'm pleased to introduce Nick Rycar, my colleague, and Pierre Tessier, and I'll allow them to do their own introductions in a second here because they'll do a way better job than me. But before I hand it off to the presenters, just wanted to hit a couple of housekeeping rules. So all participants are going to be muted throughout the webinar. You'll receive a link to the recording once it's completed if you wanted to review again. And then finally, if you have any questions as we go, please post them in the Q&A chat box, and we'll get to those during or at the end. So with that, I want to hand it off to our presenters today, Nick and Pierre. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Certainly. So I am Nick Rycar. I am Technical Product Marketing Manager at Buildkite, and I am joined today by
Pierre Tessier. I am Director of Solution Architects at Honeycomb. Happy to talk to everybody today about combining builds with observability into one awesome package.
Right on. I like that we both went whimsy with our images there, but yeah, I thought I would have you kind of take things off the top, Pierre, and tell us kind of what Honeycomb's view of the world is.
So Honeycomb is an observability platform for your applications. We're not just another monitoring company. Observability is not another word for monitoring. Observability is about being able to ask any arbitrary question of your data. Monitoring, we talk about it's known unknowns. Observability is, I don't know the question I'm going to ask, and I don't know when I'm going to ask it or why I'm getting an answer back. That's what observability is about. So it's about finding things before you even know what you're looking for. And follow that. If we think about our mission, we want to give every engineer observability they need, but more importantly, I want to eliminate that toil. I don't want you to go up to a system and see a sea of dashboards and you don't know which one to click on. You don't know which chart to click on. I want you to be able to get in there and say, I think it's this, ask a question, or even better, just something happened and be told why it's happening to you. And that's limiting that toil and delighting our users is what we really want to do. And that right there really wraps up what Honeycomb is and what our mission is to help out engineers and application developers alike to run and deploy code to production without any fear.
Right on. Thanks, Pierre. And indeed, if you're coming here, you probably know a thing or two about Buildkite, but just in case, a little bit of level set. Wow, that after 3 or 4 slides of dark, that bright comes in with a 1-2 punch. But Buildkite is a platform for running fast, secure, and scalable continuous integration pipelines on your own infrastructure. What makes us unique is that we embrace sort of the dual benefits of hybrid SaaS, where we provide our customers and users with the convenience of a hosted platform where they can set up integrations, access control, and view dashboards, but also the security and flexibility of being able to run your builds and tests behind your firewall. Your code never has to leave your servers, and you're able to test things in as close to a production-like environment as is relevant to your world. As when you combine these things together, you get a lot of the benefits of both on-prem and cloud native with a few less of the trade-offs. When it comes to integrating Buildkite with build events, which is sort of the wrapper executable that seeds data into the pipeline data query. What I'm going to start using words really meticulously, so apologies in advance for any colloquialisms I use. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to send data to Honeycomb to gain insight into what's happening on our builds. The way build events works is it structures data very consistently, where you essentially have 3 levels in the tree here, where the root span covers your entire build, and then that build is broken up into steps, each of which can have many commands. And the way that this is accomplished is that there's an executable that you wrap around the things that are being executed. And these are executed in sort of the opposite order that they show up in the tree, so that in a simplified view, you're running build events command 1 to n times for however many commands you have in a step. You're ending that step with build event step. You repeat those 2 steps for as many steps as you have, and then you finish off the build with build events build and send it the success or failure. Integrating that with Buildkite isn't too difficult, but we do need to understand the information that we'll need before we get started. So in order to send this data to Honeycomb, we're going to need to know when our build started. Thankfully, that information is available to us in the Buildkite API. We're going to need to know the start time of each step, which we can just capture as a variable while we're running our commands. And then we're going to need a unique identifier, both for our build itself and for each step that we run within our build. And thankfully, we have some pre-built environment variables that can serve this function for us. So most of this is going to end up happening within Buildkite hooks. Hooks allow you to define sort of repeatable tasks that are happening along the build lifecycle, so that you can automate and structure what you're doing. And it makes it very easy for us to integrate the build events process into our workflow. So we'll start with the post checkout hook, which runs right after you check out your code. And we're just going to go ahead and grab the build events executable from GitHub. Honeycomb publishes Linux and Mac OS pre-built executables. So I'm just going and grabbing it via curl here. In the pre-command hook, which runs immediately before our command, we're setting a bunch of the variables that we're going to end up needing later. We're going ahead and grabbing the build start time, which if any step fails, we're going to need to be able to send that to Honeycomb. We're going to go ahead and convert that into UTC and Epic, because that's the format that build events takes. And we're also going to make note of the current time, since we're just starting a step here. On the other side of our commands and the post command hook, we'll do the other end of it, where we initiate our key, and if there's a failure, finish off our build and send that failure report. I'm also making use of Buildkite step keys here. They allow you to label your steps, and that gives us a nice and dry variable that we can use for any number of steps as we're building this out. Finally, there's the actual command, and that will likely go inside your pipeline.yaml or within any scripts that you're running from within Buildkite here. And it's pretty much identical. And actually, this is going to end up being the Ruby Docker example pipeline that's available in Buildkite's example pipelines. But all we're doing here is taking the command we would have run, rspec, and wrapping it with build events, so that we are giving it, in this case, our build ID as a unique identifier for the build, and each step has its own unique identifier as well. Make note of the $$ here. We're escaping this value so that it doesn't get interpolated too early. I don't want my pipeline upload steps step ID. I want my rspec test step ID. And there'll be more information on sort of syntax and what's going on there in our docs. But ultimately, this will go ahead and capture everything except for a success. So if any of the steps along the way fail, they're going to go ahead and get captured in that post command hook, and we'll send the failure to Honeycomb. If we make it all the way to the end, we want to send the success as well. So we have a wait step here. This ensures that anything below the wait step isn't executed in parallel. We want to wait for everything else to complete before running the build report step. And then all this does is send that final success to Honeycomb. So if we've made it this far, we're a success. If not, we've captured the failure earlier in our pipeline. And with that, we can go ahead and take a look at a live environment. So I'm going to go ahead and change my screen share real quick to my whole computer. We're all friends here. I trust you. And we can take a look at a pipeline that I've already got set up, sending things to build events. So everything that I just covered is covered in more detail in the build events repo itself, available on GitHub. So definitely recommend folks have a look there. But we're actually seeing here, I have build events configured, and we're getting a little heat map of all of the builds that have come from my Ruby Docker pipeline. I have things broken up by their status, so I can see my successful runs, and it looks like there was a failed run pretty recently. And I can go ahead and click on any run in here to get some information about it. So we see that it didn't ever get to the final step. It got all the way through to running the RSpec tests, but something went wrong. So we can go directly to the build URL from here and see what all happened. Inside of Buildkite, we end up having the details of the run itself. We can see the nature of the failure. Well, my test was expecting 42 to equal 41. That seems like a reasonable thing to fail on. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. I think I've already got my code checked out. And you'll notice things are a little bit different in my repo than they were in my slide deck. The biggest difference is, and I'll make this a little bit bigger for webinar sharing, is one, I'm using a slightly different identifier. I'm using my pipeline slug and build number as an identifier. This is great for demos because it makes things nice and human readable, but this is not going to be as guaranteed to be unique as the build ID. So that probably makes for a better default identifier. The other thing that's worth noting is that I'm also running the build events from within my Docker container. So I am sending a few variables into Docker Compose when I'm running things. But the part we care about is, let's go into our sample spec here. And yeah, that's very silly. Let's make 42 is supposed to be equal to 42. And we're going to go ahead and fix it. Push things out. And in Buildkite, we're going to go ahead and automatically kick off a build when it sees that a new change has been pushed to a branch. This should run particularly quickly. It doesn't take fairly quickly, rather. It doesn't take very long for our spec to tell us that 42 does indeed equal 42. So most of this time is probably going to be spent just installing my gems. But you know, it's going to be able to confirm that for me, my Honeycomb dashboard. So we'll see that in just a sec. So it looks like this time when we ran the test, there were 0 failures. Good, that's what I want to see. It got to the build report step. And again, you can see sort of the payload it's sending. Here's the start time and the end time. And if I go back into Honeycomb and I go back into my heat map here and rerun my query, I should see, it looks like there is indeed, there was another failure after my previous one, probably when an automated build kicked off, but I can see the most recent one is a success. So let's take a look in here. And indeed, so now we can see we did get all the way to the build report. And as we saw in the slide deck, the root span is showing us the full 35 seconds it took to run this particular build. I can see that 16 seconds of that was spent in RSpec test. And indeed, there was more time spent on the bundle install than the RSpec test, but probably most of my time was spent in Docker Compose. So again, how much data we get here depends on where we're invoking things. So I could go ahead and wrap that process as well if I wanted to get more granular breakdowns. And as we build things out, we could make use of things like command aliases and the like inside of Buildkite to keep things fairly straightforward. But this gives us sort of a minimum viable setup that should support 1 to n steps by making use of hooks to dynamically populate those steps for us, however many we have. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to Pierre, because I know a thing or two about Buildkite, but am just learning Honeycomb myself. So when it comes to talking about the feature set, better hand to the expert. Take it away, Pierre. You are muted, my friend.
It wouldn't be a day if I'd not hear Pierre is muted. I almost made it through the day. I'm on East Coast time, and it's almost through the day. And I just couldn't do it. There's a reason why we build events, and we're an observability company. We're all about helping you understand your applications. And I think this comic really illustrates a big reason why we set out to build events, because a lot of times, a lot of engineers, you're running a build pipeline. As great as your build pipeline can be, you're always kind of waiting for it to finish. And it's a classic joke, and maybe it's a little bit tongue in cheek here, but hey, we're going to goof off because our build's running, our code's compiling. So really, this is the reason why we built it, so you could understand what's happening while you're waiting for it to finish. So we went out and we built build events, and you can see it right here. Nick already showed you a little bit about it. There's a lot of details in here and how it all works, including how you hook this up with Buildkite, but certainly followed the steps that Nick gave, the detailed steps to get to work. And we did this several years ago. And here's one of the very first traces that we drew from our CI pipeline back then on using Honeycomb. And we got a lot of really good information really fast. And what did we learn? We learned that maybe 400 seconds for a build is not that bad, because none of these things really needed to be that much optimized. So we just left it alone, and that was fine. And that happened, and we did that for about a year, and we just kept on pumping in data, and you could see, oh yeah, we went from 6 to 8 minutes, and now we're topping 14, 16 minutes over here on the right. And this is over a year's time. So we could see our builds getting slower. We could see our code base getting larger, and we could see it was getting time to smarten up what we were doing. And we did just that. We moved to a build system where we could start running steps in parallel, because that makes sense. We were building multiple different components now that were not dependent onto each other. And so we did move our build to a parallel pipeline. And you can see another year view, or more than a year view here, but kind of stretched out further off into time. And did it work? I'm not sure. It looks like it kind of worked. Kind of spread things out. Maybe that's the nature when you run things in parallel. Sometimes they catch up and they collide with each other. But this is Honeycomb. I've got all the data. I can have fun with it. I could do things like, hey, while we're at it, show me a duration of minimum. And you know what? Not only that, but I want to group this by name. And why do I? So you can see first off that duration. Yes, it got better. For sure, it got better. But now we can group it by name. We can see where did we get better in particular. And this is where it starts to get really fun, because any of those attributes for any single thing that you pass in with build events, and you can even specify custom attributes, you can slice against. You could slice and dice and do all kinds of funny things. So by looking at this view here, I can see go test. Nah, not really. Poodle build, yeah. You can save a lot of time on Poodle. Poodle is our front end. It's a show dog. All our services are named after dog breeds. Poodle test, not so much. Yarn, nothing there. And we could see that really where we gained it all was right here on the Poodle build. And by parallelizing our stuff, we gained how to make our app faster. Now, let's fast forward some time. And still today, we've been doing this for a while, and we still do it today. We build with every commit, but we don't deploy with every commit. We deploy every hour if there's any changes to production. And we encourage any high performance, high velocity engineering teams to follow very similar patterns. Why do we want you to do this? Because if you wrote code and you commit that code and you wait 2 weeks to deploy that thing to production, and that thing broke in production 2 weeks later, that context switching is really hard to do. You forgot the code you wrote. But if you wrote code, you merged that code, and an hour later it's in production and something happened, you probably had the IDE still open in that code file. You're ready to rock and roll and get into why it's happening. So we encourage you to deploy, and deploy often. All these markers here are deployments. And this is a 24-hour view. So depends if they made changes. If engineers checked in changes and they were merged into main, they will show up here. And we can even click on these, but for NDA reasons, I can't really click on this. It gives some crazy details about what's going on behind the scenes, some code files. But you can get right into your Buildkite URL and go go see what's going on. So this is another feature that's not necessarily part of build events, but can be leveraged within that same context. We call it Honey Marker. And then one day, a few months ago, we did a big change to our build. We noticed things were again creeping up in time, getting really, really slow. And we said, hey, we got to fix that and bring the builds back down. And we did this right here. We merged this commit right here in GitHub, which changed the very nature of our builds. And you can see again, we really cut it down, but I'm going to come back here. I'm going to again draw an average of duration. Right now we're looking at milliseconds now. We don't care about minutes anymore. And yes, we cut it down drastically and it's gotten much better. But it's not just that. I'm going to actually take this out here and I'm going to come back to my main chart and focus in on something, because there's more than just drawing pretty charts about your builds. It's being able to use your observability platform to tell you why something's going on, answer some of those unknown unknowns. And I'm going to go into bubble up mode. And what bubble up mode allows me to do is as a user, I'm going to draw a box around something I'm interested in, an area of my chart that looks different, that looks weird. And Honeycomb, the machine, is going to tell me why that thing is weird. It's going to answer the unknown question for me, which is, why am I looking at this and why should I be looking at it? Over here, we've got maybe a bump. In February, we could see there was a bump in an additional kind of load that happened. So I'm going to just kind of try to grab that little bump right there. Maybe I'll select that right there. And what this did is it went through every single build that we've done, every single attribute that we pass in all the builds, and it compares them all and it tries to figure out what inside here is different than everything else. So, okay, some meta version thing that probably doesn't matter. CI provider, no, none of these are really too crazy different. Maybe repo over here. It was our Hound repo, and then you can see we have quite a few other repos that we run our stuff on. Owner, I got a line standing over here. Owner, Toshak. Toshak is one of our employees at Honeycomb. Chris Toshak, really amazing engineer. Love this guy to bits. When we want a feature at Honeycomb, and we'll start talking about a feature, Toshak will come out and say, oh yeah, I got a branch for that. And there's actually a saying, Toshak has a branch for it. And sure enough, Toshak is the reason why we had that little bump of builds. And I could take this and say, well, I want to learn more. What else is Toshak doing? And I could click on this and you're going to see Toshak's building a lot of stuff, right? And I could try to, again, click on any of these data points and get right into, I got to kind of get finicky on my own clicking here, and right into the trace that Toshak was doing. And you can see our builds graduate. We started off with a very simple build back over here. We got way more sophisticated, way more things going in parallel, and it helps us understand what's going good, what's not going so good. And Toshak does some TypeScript stuff, Golang stuff, and all kinds of great stuff. But it's kind of fun to see this all kind of coming together and happening. But not only do we want you to observe your applications, we want you to get ahead of those problems in production, but we want you to use those same tools to keep an eye and observe your builds. Because if your builds can go from 15 minutes to 5 minutes, you save on compute, you save on employee resources. They see their thing happening faster. They see their commit to main or their commit to that branch and being able to deploy and see those results much faster. And that's why we want you to put observability on your builds. And that's all I had to share.
Right on. Is always the thing I love about good visualizations is they're the great democratizer, right? Like anyone can look at it and see something's odd. I might need to go find someone who can tell me the specific nature that something's odd, but that's right there for everybody to see.
And I love how Danielle Pierce just linked Toshak's shirt. It's true. It's legit. We built a shirt for this. I'm not wearing a shirt because the shirt's green and I got a green screen behind me. But yes, go get your shirt. Toshak has a branch for that. And if you want to take a trial of Honeycomb, we'll even just send you one.
Right on. I saw. So question came in on whether Buildkite is considering adding native open telemetry emission to the agent. I cannot speak to any specific plans, but I know that I have been hearing whispers in the wild from a lot of my friends, including at least one person at Honeycomb who was asking me about it. So I know that there are interested parties and that it is at least on my product folks' radar that there are interested parties out there. But yeah, definitely reach out to us if you have questions there. But there is nothing I am aware of specific on the roadmap for OpenTelemetry at the moment. All right.
On the note of OpenTelemetry, as the world continues to migrate towards that, you can certainly send all that OpenTelemetry data to Honeycomb. And as the spec evolves, CNCF is doing some great stuff there. I also heard, I think it's going to be Kubernetes 124. We should see the API server also natively supported. So some kind of fun stuff coming out of that whole entire group. And love vendor neutrality associated with that. Democratize their telemetry data.
All
right.
Also, quick shout out to there was a lot of fun during the keynotes yesterday. Where we were talking about what kind of regional euphemisms and metaphors we see, and I learned a new one. So very kind words from whoever said honeycomb looks like it goes like the clappers, which the internet informs me means you go all out. Nice reminder. We are an international conference here, and this American did not know that phrase before today, but I'm pleased to have learned it.
Apparently, it is a Britishism thing. Yes, I could see some of my friends from the UK saying the clappers. Love it. Yeah, we are known for our performance and our query speed, being able to query vast amounts of data in very short periods of time and doing analytics against that. A lot of that has to do with our data store platform. Honeycomb is not built on a time series database. And shocker to a lot of people, we don't actually have a time series database in our backend. We have a columnar store instead that we built from the ground up. Our columnar store is aware of time, but that's about it. The rest is really a columnar store that we created specifically for this purpose. And that's really what our secret sauce is all about, and why you get those rapidly awesome response times in the query.
Excellent.
Well, okay. Any more for any more? Or are we wrapping this one up?
See.
Oh, I'm seeing another one here. Can we integrate something with EventBridge? I just want to get filled in on exactly what EventBridge is before I say yes or no on this.
Well, there's Amazon EventBridge, which is
That's what I'm thinking.
Notification service. I know Buildkite integrates with it, but you can tell how much I use it from my confidence level there. Yes. At the very least, I can confirm and throw a doc out there, but we do have an EventBridge integration in Buildkite. And I just threw that into the Zoom chat for folks, and lets you stream your events in real time from Buildkite to AWS. Sweet.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, if there's no additional questions, I think that seems like a good place to leave it. But I just wanted to say thank you very much, Pierre, for joining us, and Nick as well. Very, very interesting, awesome stuff. And to everyone who joined today, you'll receive a separate email with a link for the session. So if you wanted to watch again, then you absolutely can do. But other than that, thank you very much and have a great day.
Right on.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Right back at you.